As you may know by now, Ghana's former Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta is in the custody of U.S. Immigration Authority. Ken was picked up by ICE, Immigration and Custom Enforcement on Tuesday, January 6, 2026, January 7th, and then he's in detention in their facility in Caroline, Virginia. And when I shared that information with you on Wednesday night, I made some analysis based on the letter that his lawyers shared with the public. Now, based on more information we have gathered since that information, I'm going to share with you the real reason Ken Ofori-Atta is currently in the custody of U.S. Immigration Authority. All right. Before I do that, my name is Tony. I'm a Ghanaian writer who lives in the U.S. On this channel, I talk about geopolitics from the perspective of an African. And so, if that is something you are into, if you're into intellectual conversations, subscribe to this channel. Let me start by reading you a law in the U.S. that will support everything else I'm about to say to you. All right. So, the U.S. has a provision in their Immigration and Nationality Act that states that a non-citizen can be inadmissible if their presence may cause, in quote, serious adverse foreign policy consequence. So, what that means is that when the Secretary of State of the U.S. determines that your presence in the U.S. would cause serious foreign policy problems for the U.S., you are inadmissible to the U.S. And usually, when the U.S. talks about adverse foreign policy consequence, they mean that the individual in question have issues that have to do with human rights or corruption. Human rights and corruption are usually the two most important things that the U.S. looks out for when it comes to the foreign policy consequence. There may be other things like, terrorism. That is a whole different provision. But this is important that I state that. And now, how this applies to Ken Ofori-Atta would require me explaining the U.S. immigration structure. And so let's get into a brief explanation of U.S. immigration structure. The immigration authorities in the U.S. is not just ICE. U.S. have like 5 different bodies that handles different aspects of their immigration policy. Number 1, they have the Bureau of the Consular or Consulate Affairs. They are the office that works in the U.S. embassies around the world. So the U.S. Embassy in Accra has what they call the Bureau of the Consulate Affairs, and that is where the consular officers work. Their job primarily is to issue visas to people who want to come to America. And they work under the State Department. The State Department of the U.S. is like the Foreign Affairs Ministry, all right? And so, before you can come to the U.S., that is the first person you are generally required to deal with, all right? And now, when you get a visa to the U.S., you don't automatically just enter the U.S. To be granted entry to the U.S., a different body under the Homeland Security, in Ghana, that would be the Interior Ministry, handles your entry into the U.S. Your entry into the U.S. is handled by the Custom and Border Protection. Their job is to protect the U.S. borders. So they scrutinize who gets access to the U.S. You understand? And when we say the U.S. borders, we don't mean just the land borders. Air is also a border. Sea is also a border. I don't know if you guys remember, but there was a case where a ship moving from Nigeria to, I believe, Europe was arrested in Ghana because there were some people who were doing stowaway. And then when the people were arrested, the people who were doing stowaway were captured by the Ghana Navy and given to the Ghana Immigration Service, because it is the job of the Ghana Immigration Service to protect entry through the borders of Ghana, but the Navy protects the Ghana waters. So even though the Navy protects Ghana waters, they do not arrest people. The arrest and stuff like that is done by the Immigration Service. The same way, the entry into the U.S. is done primarily by the Custom and Border Protection. So if you are eligible to enter the U.S., that means if you have the visa, they would give you what they call I-94. And I-94 means that you have permission to enter the US. You understand that? Their job is to ensure that you have permission to enter the US, period. So embassy gives you permission, that is the visa. Custom and border protection gives you entry. And then when you are in the US itself, they have what they call USCIS, that is United States Citizenship and Immigration Service. They handle what we call nkrata, paperwork. All legal documentation you need to be in the US legally is handled by USCIS. So when you apply for green card, they deal with that, and all forms of documentation, naturalization, work authorization, all those things is handled by the USCIS. That is primarily their job. You understand that? And so when someone say Mihian Nkrata, they are the ones that deal with the Nkrata. You understand that? And so from the letter that Ken Ofori-Atta lawyers sent, they said that Ken Ofori-Atta is seeking adjustment of status. Adjustment of status is usually what people call green card, which means that he's seeking legal permission to stay in the US. So the USCIS handles that. You understand that? And so currently, he's supposed to have a case with them. You understand? But the moment you applied for adjustment of status doesn't mean that you're going to get it automatically. You understand that? And so currently, Ken Ofori-Atta's case is being handled by them. The moment you apply for adjustment of status, your visa status is no longer relevant because now your stay in the US is being dealt by USCIS. You understand that? So now, Ken Ofori-Atta's, when his visa will expire, is no longer relevant because his stay in the US is handled by these people, and these people usually will give you permission to stay in your US if you file correctly. Let me emphasize that. If you file correctly, now they will now give you permit to stay in the US for as long as your case is pending before them. And then when your case is settled, now whether you are denied or confirmed, whatever happens, go on from there, right? But they handle paperwork. So if something is wrong with your papers, they don't arrest you. They will call ICE. ICE is the Immigration and Custom Enforcement. They are like the immigration police. Their job is to ensure that any enforcement in relation to immigration is dealt with by them. So USCIS can call ICE on you, and then ICE will take you to immigration court. Now, the immigration court, we'll come back to ICE because I want to deal with that one last because it's the most important aspect. The immigration court in the US is just like any court. Is in Ghana, the Ghana court system is under the Ministry of Justice. In the US, the courts are generally under the Department of Justice. In the Department of Justice, the immigration courts are also under the Department of Justice, which means that now I've mentioned three ministries. The State Department, the USCIS is under Homeland Security, and Border is also under Homeland Security. ICE is also under Homeland Security. So those are two different ministries. The Immigration Court is under Department of Justice. Now, there are people, now let's go back to the ICE and then deal with that. Now, you remember I said USCIS can call ICE on you? Now, ICE generally only acts on triggers. ICE cannot just be walking on the street of America and just be arresting people. Just like the police cannot just be walking on the street and be arresting people. Usually, when the police makes an arrest, it is because of suspicion. And under immigration, the suspicion is what we call trigger. So I'll use the word suspicion and trigger interchangeably. So ICE can pick you up on suspicion. But something would have to trigger that suspicion. And I'm mentioning some few things that have to deal with the suspicion, and then I will focus on the one that deals with Ken Ofori-Atta. A trigger would be an unlawful entry. So you remember when ICE usually will arrest people who came to the US illegally, unlawful entry is a trigger. Another thing is overstays without what's the name, exception. If your visa expires and you don't have a USCIS permit to stay in the US, ICE can arrest you for overstays. Number 3, visa misuse. Visa misuse can be the fact that you are using your visa to commit a crime, right? Maybe you committed a crime, which means that you are misusing your visa. Let's say you are here on student visa and you are not going to school. That is visa misuse. And number 4, change of circumstance. That is usually very tricky because the fact that you have a visa doesn't mean that you are permitted to stay in the US permanently. Your visa can be legal, but something would have changed in your life to cause your visa to be questionable. Let's say you came to the US legally, and when you came to the US, they find out that you are in communication with Al Qaeda or ISIS. They find out after you are given the visa. Now your visa misuse situation will be a change of circumstance, right? That's a change of circumstance. And it can mean anything. Another thing is interagency referral. Now, the change of circumstance, visa misuse, and interagency referral all can apply to Ken Ofori-Atta here. And I will explain why. You need a trigger to arrest somebody on immigration basis, right? The trigger can be anything. The trigger can be the government of Ghana telling the US that Ken Ofori-Atta is wanted in Ghana for corruption. Remember when I said that when the law that I read that said cause serious adverse foreign policy consequence, and that usually means human rights abuses or corruption. The moment the US government have hints that you are wanted for charges related to human rights abuse or corruption, they have a reason to remove you from the US. So there are people saying that the US arrest of Ken Ofori-Atta has nothing to do with the extradition request Ghana made to the US. Legally, that is true. But extradition is also an administrative process. So the US, when they receive the extradition request from Ghana, will now can decide to use their other administrative tools to handle the situation without having to deal with the court system. And I'll tell you why. The US Department of Justice has a 90% conversion rate at least. There are some years that they have 97% conversion rate. What that means is that of all the cases that they take to court, they have 97% of people being found guilty by the court. It's not because they are so good, it's because they don't take that many cases to court. Less than 5% of cases that they have end up going to court. So they arrest maybe 100 people. About 5% of the people they arrest end up going to court because they don't like losing in court. They like to keep their reputation. So when Ken Ofori-Atta's lawyers went to BBC and started raising issues of Ken Ofori-Atta's political status, they had a good defense. I listened to Ken Ofori-Atta's lawyers. They had a very good defense, which means that when the US Department of Justice go to court, they could lose the case. So they are not going to take the risk of taking you to court to lose the case. What they are going to do is they are going to use the other administrative tools that they have to handle your situation. So legally, they can remove Ken Ofori-Atta without having to extradite him because the charges that Ghana have against Ken Ofori-Atta have to do with things that the US will consider foreign policy, adverse foreign policy consequence. You understand? And so there are some people who are saying that my earlier video was confusing. I hope this clears up the confusion. Yes, he was arrested not because of the extradition request, but the extradition request is a trigger that he is, quote unquote, a dangerous person who needs to be removed from the US. It doesn't mean that he is. The suspicion alone is enough for them to remove you. Why? Because Ken Ofori-Atta is not a US citizen. So when they remove him, he has very little recourse. That is the importance of why the two. Hi, how you doing? All right. That is the reason why his situation is dicey. You understand that? And so it has nothing and also everything to do with his extradition request. I just wanted to clear that part out for sure so that so that's about it. In future, if you see something in my videos that you don't understand, leave comments and I'll explain it. And so that's about it. There is a pretty girl standing there trying to say hi to me. So as a single man, this year my mom wants me to get married. So, I need to go say hi to her.